going to be a very special presentation in honor of the Bowery mission's 150th anniversary. We're very excited to have Brian Ourien here today. Come on up, Brian. Brian's going to join us. Hey, Brian. Brian's going to join us and speak a bit about himself, his organization, or the organization he works for, and kind of how they've gone through this anniversary celebration, what they do, how PhotoShelter has played a role in their storytelling. So we're going to get started in just a moment. Hello, Brian. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here.
Of course. All right, we're getting Brian's screen up here. Just got to go full screen and then we should be good to go. Amazing. Cool, Brian. I'll let you do your thing and introduce yourself to everyone watching. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everyone who's joined us today. Like Jeremy said, my name is Brian Ourien, and at the Bowery Mission, we've been around for just over 150 years, and so this year is incredibly special to us. Prior to joining the Bowery Mission, I worked in media, and I started out as a journalist, and then found my interest in corporate communication, which is where I did my graduate studies in, and then eventually found my way into the Bowery Mission through a long journey of higher education, business, and then at the nonprofits. So I'm really glad to be at the Bowery Mission because it sort of brings together my communication interest in journalism and a little bit of a creative interest in corporate communication. And so those things all come together for me at the Bowery Mission. So it's exciting to be here, especially for such a time as this. 150 years is a huge milestone, and so incredibly proud of the work we've been a part of for 150 years. So I'll share a little bit about the work that we do and where we started, just to give you a sense of who we are and what we've been up to the past 150 years. So we describe the work we do as our calling to love well. We exist to ensure the flourishing of New Yorkers experiencing homelessness, people who typically live on the margins of society. And this year we're celebrating 150 years of the work that we've been doing here in New York City, serving our neighbors experiencing homelessness and hunger. And so what we've become today is a community, a caring community that provides life-transforming services, and we are obviously inspired by faith. In fact, our beginnings were faith-inspired. So in 1872, the very first city mission was inspired by Jerry McAuley and his wife Maria McAuley, who founded the very first city mission in New York City on Water Street. The location where they founded the first mission doesn't exist anymore. It's right at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge right now. So that intersection where the mission was doesn't exist anymore. But that was the very first inspiration for what became and what ignited a movement of like missions across the country. In fact, right now there are more than 300 missions of this kind across the country. And we all our inspiration and our founding to Jerry and Maria McAuley, who themselves were self-described criminals, and they found amazing transformation through faith. And their story, we say, is not very far away from our own stories as human beings, often broken and just dealing with a lot of stuff. So Jerry describes himself as a river thief. Maria describes herself as a lady of the night. And at the time, obviously, in Lower Manhattan on the Lower East Side, it was pretty rough, as rough as you can imagine, with all sorts of illicit trades. Jerry described himself as a river thief, like I said. He used to steal boats and, run away. He eventually got incarcerated at Sing Sing Correctional Facility up in Ossining, not very far from New York City, and spent a few years there, during which time he heard the testimony of someone who himself was uh, he describes him as a thug in on the Lower East Side. Having heard this story of amazing transformation while Jerry was incarcerated, Jerry thought, wow, if this gentleman, Orville Gardner, could find transformation, perhaps I'm not too far gone myself. And when he left prison, he found that amazing transformation, and he describes it as his faith journey, finding God, finding redemption, and transforming his life, and found himself to be trusted by people who knew him as a river thief. So he just found amazing grace in that trust that people had in him. And then he met his wife Maria, got together and decided, well, with the little that we have, we'll make a sign, put it up. They provided a bed for people to sleep. They provided endless coffee, and they provided all sorts of food that people needed with the little resources that they had. But even though their lives were difficult, and both grew up in abject poverty on the Lower East Side, they gave themselves up for this work because they were familiar with the environment that they were in, and so they saw themselves as being part of the change. With the little they had, they stepped in to make a difference as best they could. So we think of Jerry and Maria McAuley as inspiring countless missions, but really their story of transformation inspires and has inspired over 150 years countless thousands of other stories just like them. I think of the gentleman Ed Morgan in spectacles, right there in glasses. He was a speechwriter for Jack Welch at GE, and then decided to retire early and take on a leadership role at the Bowery mission. And I was just thinking, wow, what a life transformation from corporate America, one of the largest companies in the US, into a nonprofit such as this, carrying on the vision of Jerry and Maria McAuley. I think of Fanny Crosby, top right, who 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 was blind, but found her mission joining us at the Bowery Mission. And she's credited as having written more than 6,000 hymns. And so it's an incredible person, incredibly gifted at writing music. And in fact, her piano resides at the Bowery Mission today. Um, I think of a familiar name that many of you would recognize, J.C. Penney, bottom right. Um, he also found transformation walking on the Bowery, on the street, on the Bowery Street, in a moment of distress, walks into a mission on the Bowery, and found just this amazing connection with some of the poorest people in the city. And this was in the 1920s. And he, in fact, became a benefactor of the Bowery Mission, and donated at the time $1 million to the Bowery Mission, and supported us for the longest time. In fact, saved the Bowery Mission from going under. And that came from his own experience of walking into a mission on the Bowery and finding that transformation. And that So the 150th celebration that we just did this past month was really a nod to the stories that ignited this mission and that inspired countless other missions around the country. And so we took this idea of story of stories, like what is the meaning of someone's story? Like when one person's life is transformed, the power that they have to effect change around them and to influence others is quite enormous. If Jerry and Maria McAuley rose from the dead today, they would be amazed that there are millions of people who owe their lives transformed to them. And so this was just a way for us to look back at the history of the Bowery mission and celebrate those stories from many years ago, but also to connect that to current day. So we looked at interesting ways to tell these stories because the stories are deep, and as many of us are familiar with, homelessness is a difficult issue to talk about because what is homelessness? Like what causes homelessness? Homelessness looks very different for different people. If you live in New York City, you might sit on the subway right next to someone who might be homeless. You would never know. We walk past people on the street every day who might be homeless, but we would never know. And so there's some sort of anonymity with homelessness. You don't really know. You can tell by looking at someone. And yet, deep down, people are dealing with all sorts of struggles. In fact, many of us are only a paycheck away from homelessness, perhaps a huge medical bill away from homelessness, perhaps job loss away from homelessness. And so there's that sense of we don't know what's happening around us, and yet it's so close to us. So we came up with this idea of silhouettes that just captures a facelessness to homelessness, and yet every individual facelessness is a story. There's a story behind every silhouette, every face, every facade has a depth to it that when you once you dive into it, you discover an amazing journey of promise and perhaps dreams crashed, but also a lot of promise for what people could accomplish. Just using the example of Jerry and Maria McAuley, and I told you about Fanny Crosby and J.C. Penney, and so we decided to put up a museum quality timeline that would showcase the history of the Bowery mission and put it in context. Just a fun fact: this year we're doing our 143rd Thanksgiving celebration, where we host about 1,000 guests, do a huge meal at our flagship campus on the Bowery. And so that is apparently the longest running New York City Thanksgiving tradition. It's 45 years older than the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Just a fun fact there. But we just chose to celebrate the stories that have made up the corporate story of the Bowery Mission, and in fact, the story of New York, because homelessness is as old as New York itself. Um, so during this celebration, you can see bottom left how the silhouette, how the timeline came alive, and you see the silhouettes in the deep background. We also did portrait illustrations, as you can see in the picture on the top middle. It was just amazing to see those come alive and well lit in a huge historical room that is a very historical former bank on the Bowery too. Bottom right is what you can see what the silhouettes looked like on the day of the event. Um, and we also were privileged enough to publish a book, a collection of stories. It's a very short book, but has some of the depth of stories that we see every single day at the Bowery Mission. And this is not just stories from the 1800s. It's stories that we see right now. Every single day at the Bowery Mission, we see these stories unfold, and perhaps in another 100 years, we'll be writing books about the people that we're seeing right now coming through the doors of the Bowery Mission. And so we thought, how could we capture this? And we worked with a production, a packaging company, a luxury packaging company based in London. And they reached out to us and said, hey, you're celebrating 150 years. What could we do for you? And we told them about this idea of storytelling, and we collaborated with them on producing this book, which is a true gift to us, but also just capturing the stories of the Bowery mission. The team that works in this, and the team that we work with through the year, putting on these stories, going through all the content that we put out as the Bowery mission, the creative process involves this entire team of people. We have a content manager who basically gathers all the content to make sure that we have all the assets that we need, whether it's visual assets or um, um, story assets that we need. That person makes sure that we have those. We're brand marketing supervisor who makes sure we're remaining on brand. We have the marketing collateral that we need. An events director who are just an amazing team of people who are able to conceptualize an event and build schematics that we can execute for a successful event. A digital team that supported, we created a microsite specifically for the 150th celebration. And it's sort of a hub where everything lives, from an amazing historical video that we had to the silhouettes and the stories that we have. So the team was able to build a microsite that lives on our Bowery Mission site. And of course, engaging with our wide social media audiences to celebrate 150 years of this work. And of course, working with partners. Like I said, the book was a donation to us from a company in London. The production company that we worked with is an amazing production agency that gave us a huge discount. And so all these partnerships, the entire team comes together, bringing together content, bringing together partnerships from outside, working with production agencies, creative agencies. And of course, that is a really huge task that requires that requires something like PhotoShelter. And I have to say, I'm very proud of our association with PhotoShelter because it's a game changer. It was a game changer for us in putting on this huge project. We planned this for an entire year, so that required meticulous arrangement, meticulous archiving of all sorts of assets. So we have more than, I think we have more than 60,000 individual assets in our library, dating from the 1870s up to today. So you can see that such a huge task. So PhotoShelter was quite invaluable to us in how we categorized all these things. And like I said before, we worked with external agencies like the agency that helped us put the book on, and the production agency that we're still working with. And so our collaboration is very seamless in PhotoShelter. It just makes it very easy for us to collaborate both internally and externally. And you can see how we I mean, obviously, everyone arranges their libraries in different ways, but what we found very helpful was to just categorize things by period. You know, stories from this period, stories that concern this specific person. Easy to search for keywords. If you searched James Macklin, you'd pull up everything that relates to James Macklin. So finding pictures from history, finding videos from history was pretty easy. And of course, contemporary work that we're doing now, we run all sorts of campaigns, whether it's social media or out of home advertising. So we working in partnership with Link NYC. For those who are familiar with Link NYC, they have advertising kiosks around the city. They have about 2,000 of those, and again, granted us free access to a lot of those. And so PhotoShelter again, using that collaboration with a creative agency to help us manage these assets, manage this project, has been incredibly invaluable. But all in all, right now, what the Bowery mission does is, our mission really is to connect people in need to resources, and part of that involves storytelling. Like from 150 years up until today, every single story that comes that goes through the Bowery mission represents an individual who with a lot of promise and whose life has potential for transformation. And so we take those stories and we share those stories with one another. We share those stories with the public. We share those stories with people who might be thinking of themselves as, you know, I'm in need of help. Where can I get help? And we at the Bowery Mission, we say, you can come to the Bowery Mission. Look at Daryl, whose life was transformed. How about you? Step into this possibility of of transformation. We have the resources to walk alongside you. We don't transform people's lives, but we walk alongside them in their journey of transformation. And so as we write the Bowery Mission story, as we write the story of homelessness in New York, this story involves thousands of people, thousands of stories that together come together to tell the corporate story of the Bowery Mission, and indeed the story of homelessness in New York. So thank you again for listening to me. I appreciate the time.
Amazing, Brian. What can I say? I mean, that was very, very special. You're a great speaker, and what an awesome representative you are to kind of share a bit about the story there. I'm going to take this back here and bring our slides back up again. And now we want to chat through some Q&A. I know you and I we're going to chat a bit more about who you are and what you guys do, but that was a really special presentation. I can't thank you enough for kind of walking us through some of the history there and how the creative kind of piece of it all comes together, how meaningful and impactful you and your team are for the NYC community, the homeless community in New York. I'm battling with some sunlight, but um, I'm happy to chat with you through some questions. So I do have some questions here from that we prepared ahead of time, but also from people who kind of submitted some questions. And as we talk through, I do want to encourage everyone to jump into our Slack group or submit questions directly via the webinar in the questions box. And in the meantime, while we're chatting, definitely take some time to visit the Bowery Mission's website, bowery.org, and kind of learn more about how you can get involved, what they're up to, where you can donate, etc. Brian, I want to start with some questions here and kind of chat with you for a bit. You spoke a bit about this, but I do want to dive into a bit more about your story in particular. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background? How did you get into nonprofit work in particular? Maybe for those who maybe missed it at the beginning, or just to expand on it a bit more, and then more specifically how you got involved with the Bowery Mission.
Yeah, so I studied journalism and was a journalist for a few years, and then fell in love with documentary filmmaking. And so I traveled around the world doing documentary films and mostly telling stories of human need, of incredible poverty, and sometimes really difficult circumstances, and just what nonprofits or humanitarian groups were doing to help people overcome challenges, either poverty or limited access to justice, or all sorts of stories as you can imagine. Um, and I found an incredible passion in just telling the stories of people. But after a while, I began to feel I began to feel like, I spent a lot of time telling these stories. What about if I was proximate to the story? What if I was part of bringing about the change that whose story I tell every day? Like, I see this person is doing a great job. This person is doing a great job. What about me? How do I participate in this? And so I did my graduate studies in corporate communication just to get a sense of what is the role that organizations and businesses can play in bringing about transformation. So I kind of moved away from journalism to look at a macro view for how we can create change. And I found a great expression of it, having tested, I was marketing director for a real estate company, which, as you can imagine, in New York City is a bit of a cutthroat environment. So seeing that and just saying, well, it's not terrible, but it's just that there's a lot of power in business. Business has the ability to impact people's lives, just as nonprofit has the ability to impact people's lives. So an organization like the Bowery Mission, I get to be part of telling stories, telling impactful stories, being part of corporate journeys, being part of individuals' journeys, and so that is very life giving for me. And so yeah, so that's my journey. Like finding the Bowery Mission, it was just a confluence of my love for storytelling and just my wanting to do something close to people on the ground, so to say.
That's amazing. That's super special. I love that. Um, I often wonder how many people, because I studied journalism myself in college, and I do often wonder how many people go from journalism to a more nonprofit or kind of not that journalism isn't meaningful, but more
Mhm.
impactful, meaningful kind of direction after kind of learning about what's going on through journalism and current events and stuff. So very
Yeah.
interesting to hear about that. Um, for those who don't know, how many locations does the Bowery Mission have around the city? And can you tell us about more about your campuses and what you've got going on around?
Yeah, so the Bowery Mission has 6 campuses in the city of New York, and then one a retreat center campsite in the Poconos. That's coming up on 130 years as well. We have our flagship campus right on the Bowery that's been operational uh, from eight from 1879, continuously operated from 1879. So right on the Bowery, where we feed up to 1,000 meals a day. We serve up to 1,000 meals a day for anyone in need, no questions asked. Walk in, get a warm meal prepared by an executive chef. So we take our food very seriously. So hot food in a community environment. During the pandemic, we did social distancing and had to go meals, and we are so happy to bring back indoor dining for Thanksgiving. We're serving 1,000 meals in a sit-down meal, which is incredible. And so we're excited about what we do at that campus. And our other campus in Lower Manhattan on the Lower East Side is at 90 Lafayette, and we have overnight beds. We have up to 124 beds for men and women. You need a place for the night. You need a place to crash. Something went wrong. Whatever the story is, walk in and we'll find a bed for you if we have a bed. If we don't, we'll refer you to another place. And then uptown campuses, we have a couple of campuses. These are designed for people who, yes, I've been to the Tribeca campus and I've stayed 7 days. What next for me? I want to, I need to find another job. Perhaps I need to deal with mental health issues. I need to get out of an addiction. So we have programs designed for those individuals, and we encourage everyone who comes to our doors for food or for a bed. We're like, hey, if you're if you're experiencing homelessness, we have a pathway for you to get out of it. And so some of that pathway is we say that every a life of transformation begins with a warm meal. And so the meal serves as an invitation. A night of shelter serves as an invitation to join our longer term programs at our uptown campuses, which are housed in brownstones, pretty much. So you may not even notice that this is a Bowery Mission campus, but we have uh, individuals living there, making huge life transformational decisions, pivoting from one job to another, getting vocational training, getting counseling, working with social workers, working through difficult circumstances. And so those campuses exist to house people for up to 18 months and just ensure that at the end of that journey with us, they have a job, they have an apartment, they're able to sustain their lives independently. And then, of course, in the Poconos, we do a camp for city kids. Every summer we host um, a huge number of kids up in the Poconos, and the kids pay pretty much nothing. But this is what we've been doing for 128 years, sending kids up to the Poconos. It's just allowing them to get some respite from the city. The city is a difficult place. Growing up in the city, you don't get exposed to nature as much as you need to, especially if you're if you're if you're living on the margins, your parents are struggling to make ends meet. You may never get the chance to do that, and so we're trying to, in one way or another. I won't claim to be. I won't claim to say that we're preventing homelessness, but we're creating a new path of possibility for these kids to imagine a life in which they're different from their current circumstances. So we're very proud of that operation, serving those kids, and yeah, that's what we do.
Incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah, incredible. I will say, like, even if you are, even if you and your team and the organization over time was just feeding people, that would be special enough. But to have, resources and shelter and, different locations to kind of bring people out and expose people to new things and, make people realize, kind of foster people to realize that there's more opportunities out there. That's just so special. So thank you and your team for doing that, and that's
Yeah.
amazing to hear about. A bit related, and you might have spoken a bit about this when you talked about the book, but I'm curious. Do you partner with other local or national nonprofit organizations to generate resources and build awareness across your audience segments? And what are some highlights? How do you do that?
Yeah, so we're part of this huge network of, like I said, more than 300 nonprofits, agencies like ours that were inspired by Jerry and Maria McAuley. And so that network is called Citygate Network. So there's a lot of collaboration within that network, sharing ideas, sharing resources, programmatic resources. And in fact, in New York City, four of those organizations come together in a huge 4 weeks event that we call Don't Walk By, where every Saturday, those four organizations with volunteers from across the city, we walk every street in Manhattan, um, trying to find people who are experiencing street homelessness and engaging them and trying to connect them to resources. So that kind of partnership and collaboration is alive and well within that network of Citygate, but we also collaborate with government agencies and other nonprofits for specialized medical care that our guests and clients need. We partner with schools, like we have an optometry clinic partnered with a school to provide free care for our guests. We partner with a medical bus that comes once a week in front of our building and parks there and just provides much needed service to our guests. So there's a lot of cross-functional partnerships with other nonprofits and agencies.
Yeah, it sounds like you have like a very surround sound support system to kind
Yeah.
of elevate what you already offer, which is really
Yeah,
amazing.
we can't
Uh,
do this alone. We can't do this alone. And in fact, we every year we host about 6,000 volunteers, like people like you and I who step in and serve a meal, talk to our guests. We couldn't do this without them either.
Totally. I love that. Here's another question. What are three, or I guess you can decide, what are three most important components of your content strategy as in your role as director of brand marketing and communications? What are three important components of your content marketing strategy? Can you give any examples of implementing them, and why are they so important to your mission?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we face in dealing with homelessness is just an absence of empathy. Like during the pandemic, we saw an amazing generosity. People who were holed up in their houses just thought, if I have a home, I'm safe, I'm socially distanced. What about the people on the street? They have nowhere to work from home, so to say, they have no homes to work out of. And so there was a lot of generosity. But as the pandemic has receded, we've started to see a lot less empathy. So what we're doing is really to try and inspire people to see homelessness as, this is not them and us. It's about we're all in this together. In fact, in New York City, we always say we're New York strong. What does that mean? It means I'm like the person who sits next to me on the subway. If something affects them, it affects me too. And so we're trying to raise that empathy and by providing valuable content for like just like what does it mean to be homeless? How can we relate to people who are homeless? Like what does it mean for you to recognize someone as a human being? So we kind of developing content that creates some sort of thought leadership around here's what you can do. Um, and of course, we want to give people an opportunity to participate with us, like volunteer with us. They I'm inspired by giving back, and so uh, organizations like ours really are an outlet for people who want to be involved. You want to step into a place of service. This might be the beginning of your journey, and so we try and inspire that kind of action from people. But also we just want to let our guests and clients know there is help. This is what the Bowery Mission exists to do. We exist for the flourishing of New Yorkers. So step into what we have, step into the possibilities of life's transformation that could await you if you chose to step into it. And so a lot of our messaging is designed around those three themes: inspiring people to look at homelessness as not a problem, not an issue, but something that they can participate in making a difference in. And then, of course, interacting with, engaging our supporters, people who wants to be involved, and our clients as well, who we're very indebted to. We're privileged in them allowing us to walk alongside them in their journey, and so we a lot of our communication is directed at them too.
Amazing. I love that. And you sound very, obviously you're passionate about your mission, but you sound very like, in the weeds and, very involved, which is amazing to hear. And it's very special to kind of listen to you talk about it. A bit more about content and sharing stories. Prior to using PhotoShelter, how did your team organize your content and collaborate? And then how has a DAM system like PhotoShelter kind of switched the story and made an impact on your team?
Yeah, and think of story assets going back decades. Imagine what that would look like if you were to go into an archive. It would be practically impossible. And we're still in the middle of this journey, like going through categorizing things, labeling things correctly. But a tool like PhotoShelter is invaluable in that sense. Just allowing you to archive and categorize things in a way that makes sense. So that, say, if I was collaborating with Jeremy on a project, all I needed to do was grant Jeremy access to a folder, and anything in that folder would be accessible to you. And if I wanted something from another folder that was relevant to Jeremy, I'll just move that into that folder so that you have access. So we're able to collaborate internally, but very importantly, like for the 150th, we collaborated with the luxury packaging London-based firm. We collaborated with a New York-based creative agency and a production agency, and so all of that was made possible just by a tool like PhotoShelter. It just makes collaboration much easier. And so how you categorize the information I mean, we're still on that journey. I mean, because we have like thousands and thousands of assets.
Yeah, I mean, a historic organization with years and years and decades of memories and history and content and stories definitely is a special case when it comes to a digital asset management system with tons to look back on and archive and organize. So it's cool to hear how you are beginning to kind of uh, go through that and organize things and learn as you go and collaborate using those tools. You mentioned this a bit in your presentation and just now when you're talking about kind of collaborating, but can you speak just a little bit more about the book that you produced for the 150th anniversary? I think you mentioned on our prior call that you did this in under a month. Is that true? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we when we were envisioning what telling stories of a 150-year existence would be, we thought stories would be great. And we thought, obviously, we'll have a website, obviously, we'll have a video, and obviously, we'll have an event. But we had this dream in the back of our mind, what if we had something that we could have in people's hands, like something that people could take away with them that celebrates 150 years, but also captures the essence of who we are through the stories of people whose lives have been impacted by going through the mission or being involved with the mission in one way or another. And we got a call from someone who had spoken to our CEO and says, "Hey, we're a luxury packaging company. What could we do for you?" And we said, there's this little idea of a book. Could you what could become of this? And they said to us, well, we'll fund everything. All you have to do is give us the content. We'll find the illustrators. We decided to go with illustration, find the designers, we'll print the book, and we'll uh, ship it to you in New York. And the book was printed in Poland. And so the coordination between New York and London and Poland, obviously through PhotoShelter, but the book having been published, we just like were able to um, write these amazing stories, just talk about transformation, because we're all about transformation. And these stories in the book are such a gift to our community. And if I could send a book to each one of you, I would. But it's just an amazing way to see the providence of the stories that we have. Just reading through these stories is a transformative experience, and it was for me. Even though we published the book in under a month, working with the creative team. Actually, it was a collaboration between New York, London, Poland for printing, and one of our illustrators in India, one of their illustrators in India. So it was just this massive project that came together. A lot of pressure, like I said, about a month to write a book, but it was well worth it.
Amazing. Like a truly a global effort, then it seems, which is very, very special. Is the book available for people who are interested? Is that something that people can access or purchase or anything like that?
Yeah, the book is not available for sale or anything like that. It's it's a gift to our community, and so I would encourage you to interact with us, join us in this mission, and when you come visit, when you come volunteer, come see me, ask me for a book. I'd be happy to share that.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Just a few more questions before we wrap up here. When you mentioned food in the beginning, and you mentioned a chef prepares some meals for people, I was curious personally, um, what goes into that process? Like, where are you like gathering those resources? Do you work with local organizations in that way as well? And also, like, I was curious, like, is there a menu? Like, how do you decide what is available to people and when you serve it and who you work with to do that?
Yeah, we have an entire team led by our executive chef and food services people who are all uh, properly trained and certified for food handling. And so we take food very seriously because it's the beginning of our interaction with our guests and clients. And so it's a huge part of who we are, just that meal. And we make sure that it's always a hot meal because that's great. We think of it as a home cooked meal. What would you get if you had a home? And so we try and provide that. If you can't get this anywhere, at least you don't have a home yet, but you have the Bowery mission. You can have a good meal, and become part of the community. But we take it seriously. The food comes from, wow, we get a lot of food from amazing partners, companies like Whole Foods and other businesses, other businesses around us, give us a lot of food, and a lot of it is free. We have a community of the Amish and Mennonite communities in Pennsylvania who supply us with weekly produce, fresh produce. We have, eggs, countless baskets of eggs provided by the Mennonite and Amish communities in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of people coming together to give us food. We buy some of the food, but I should say that the bulk of the food that we serve, that we cook and serve, is given to us, is donated to us, which is a truly amazing thing to even say. just the generosity that surrounds us is amazing. And I would encourage you to look out in the next few months. We'll be doing a short video on the journey of food at the Bowery Mission. Like, where does our food come from, and when it ends up on the plate, our guest's plate, it's perhaps uh, really the best meal that you could have. And of course, our chefs, like for Thanksgiving, um, everything is being prepared in house. We have over 200 turkeys being marinated as I speak right now. We have 740 uh, pounds of chutney and sakachash. We're going to be making over 2,000 pieces of cornbread. Uh, 600 pounds of potatoes, so it's a massive effort, and a lot of this food comes from generous supporters.
Yeah. Wow. I love that you like know the numbers too. Like you're really embedded in this process, and it's amazing to hear about the food and the journey there too. I'm definitely looking forward to that video or that content about that, because that's super interesting and obviously a very special part of your mission. Um, that brings me to one of my last questions. I'll do two more questions before we end for today. Um, you kind of spoke about this because Thanksgiving is coming up, but is there anything that's like coming up for you guys? And this could include Thanksgiving, of course, but anything that's like coming up programming wise or event wise or opportunity wise for supporters and volunteers that maybe you can speak on? Like what's coming up soon for you? I know Thanksgiving is a busy time for you, as you mentioned, so I'm sure that's top of mind, but
Yeah, Thanksgiving coming up next week. We'll have about 350 volunteers serving with us. It's the biggest day on our calendar, and like I said, it's perhaps the biggest sit-down meal in New York City, and so we get very excited about that. But through the year, we really encourage people to step in and volunteer, be part of the over 6,000 volunteers that we have, get to see how we do this work. People have questions about, what truly happens in a shelter like the Bowery Mission. What happens in a food program like the Bowery Mission? You can come and see for yourself. You can participate in what we're doing. If you're far away, like I heard someone is in North Carolina, follow us on social media, get a sense of what we're doing. Perhaps even do a fundraiser on our behalf, because the Bowery Mission is entirely funded by individuals and corporations. We are privately funded, so we don't get any huge money from somewhere. We do a lot of fundraising drives, and so you could participate in that. That's one way that we continue to do what we do, and that's how we've been able to sustain ourselves for 150 years. It's really the generosity of people around us that's made that possible. But yeah, I say learn about us. Visit Bowery.org. Send me an email. Let's begin those conversations.
amazing. We'll share the your email in our Slack community so people can connect with you, and maybe we'll get you in there too, so you can network with some of these folks. That brings me to my last question. You really touched on some of these things here, but we're curious, and I'm sure everyone who's watching is curious. What are the Bowery Mission's top needs right now? What can volunteers or people who want to support bring to the table, bring physically to your locations? What are you kind of looking for? What are some items that are really like important that people can kind of gather and fundraise for?
Yeah, as we get into the colder months, like Jeremy mentioned, in New York, the temperatures just suddenly dropped, and so we tend to give away a lot of coats. Thankfully, this year we have a huge amount of coats for our guests and clients. But things such as hygiene kits, things like socks, things like underwear, like things that people always need all year round. Our kitchen right now needs utensils. We need plastic cups, plastic plates, things like that we go through pretty quickly. Water is a big need. As it gets colder, it gets drier. People need to hydrate a lot more. Of course, that's all year round. In the summer, then the heat. But we kind of respond to the needs of the moment. Like as it gets colder, we're seeing people wanting to keep people warmer, wanting to get people out of the streets and into our buildings. So that means that we have to have resources available, sort of an endless amount of resources. Things like coffee, which is a constant need that we have. So especially in the winter months, we want to be able to make sure that everyone who needs something can find that at the Bowery mission. So whatever you do, I think will be helpful. And if you'd like to be like very specific about what you can do, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You could also set up a fundraiser and do something alongside us.
Amazing. Yeah, I know that I'm personally planning to get involved. You've certainly inspired me, and our PhotoShelter team would love to, you know, get involved as well. And speaking of that, when we are having people sign up for today's webinar, one of the registrants, we wanted to kind of make a donation on their behalf. And so we selected Kate Barnett. Kate Barnett, if you're tuning in, thank you for joining us today and being the person behind our donation. If you're not tuning in right now, I'm sure you'll hear from us soon. And if you are, thank you again for making an impact, joining us and watching. We will be making a donation to the Bowery mission on your behalf. And I'm personally gonna speak to my team about how we can get over to your campuses, Brian, and kind of see what we can do together outside and beyond this webinar.
We'd love to have you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Brian. We're going to wrap it up. If there's anything else you would like to say, please feel free. But before we do say goodbye, for anyone who's still on the line, if you're interested in learning more about PhotoShelter, you can scan this QR code and learn a bit more about how you can take your visual storytelling to the next level and kind of, you know, learn about collaborating and organizing your visual assets like Brian spoke about today. I'll leave this here for now for anyone who's interested. But Brian, any closing words?
Just to homelessness is huge. No one's going to ask you to solve homelessness. In fact, we've been trying to do it for 150 years, and yet homelessness still grows. But together, we can join forces and come together to make a difference. Even if it's just one person's life that you could participate in transforming, that is invaluable. So whatever you can do, join with others and let's make a difference in the world. And thanks to Jeremy and PhotoShelter for hosting us here.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Brian. This has been super, super special. I'm definitely inspired, and I know anyone who's tuned in today will definitely be walking away inspired, and I know that anyone who watches after the fact will definitely want to get involved and learn more about what you are doing at the Bowery mission. So thank you again. It's been super special. Thank you for taking the time today. We continue, we look forward to continuing to work together. So thanks again, Brian.
Yep, thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone.